Hello, my name is Titus Holman, and this is my flight scenario for Aviation 327 commercial flight. So for a quick overview, we're going to cover this scenario. We'll talk about the plan that I have as far as this flight. We'll go through the pilot, aircraft, environmental, and external pressures, and then I'll give my conclusion on this scenario. So first of all, the scenario is that we're a newly minted commercial certified pilot on Thursday morning, and our company owner approaches us and wants to offer to pay us to fly her husband, and her daughter to a golf tournament at a nearby airport approximately 250 nautical miles away from our home airport the following day. We're going to be carrying some baggage and some golf clubs, and we have to utilize the aircraft that we're currently training in, which for me is a Cessna 172. So the trip dictated in the scenario that we plan a flight for 250 nautical miles. So for myself, I planned from Salt Lake City to Mesquite, Nevada, which is just over 250 nautical miles. It also just so happens that Mesquite, Nevada is a very common place for golf tournaments due to a large number of golf courses in that area. For the aircraft, I have a Cessna 172 Model S. It's November 272 Mike. For the weight and balance at takeoff weight with fuel, I'm at 2,546.9 pounds with a landing weight of 2,432.6 pounds. One of the big limitations we're going to find here is that to finish this trip, we're going to need more fuel than we can actually carry. I maximized the fuel with the weight and balance, and I ended up at 20 gallons of fuel. But of course, through calculations, found that I'm going to need at least 25 gallons of fuel, and that doesn't include on either of those a need for reserves of any kind. So for IFR, we're looking at an extra 45 minutes because I plan to file IFR and fly at 10,000 feet. That 45 minutes equates to about another 7 gallons. So really, I only have 13 gallons of fuel, which means we're not going to make it very far before we need to stop and get fuel, which means we'll need to land, get fuel, fly, and most likely land again and get fuel a second time before we can make it to our destination, which will extend this ETA of 3 hours 21 minutes significantly. Currently, the weather en route shows a 20-knot headwind, and as we'll see later on in our environmental section, we also have some IFR conditions. So looking at the pilot, it says we have 275 total hours and an IFR rating. We have about 10 hours in IMC and working towards our CFI. Our last flight with passengers was 95 days ago, and we are IFR current. So the first thing I saw in this is obviously we're not very experienced. 275 hours may sound like a lot, but it's really not much at all. That's actually puts us in that realm of the most dangerous pilots, which is between 250 and 500 hours. It says we have 10 hours of IMC, which again is not very much. So the potential for IMC conditions means that we may be a little more leery to use that since we don't have a lot of experience with it. Our last flight with passengers was 95 days ago, and says we're IFR current. It doesn't mention that we meet VFR currencies, so it's not saying that we've actually flown within the last 95 days, so there's the potential that we haven't. It also doesn't say if we've got any nighttime flying in that time either, so we have to assume we don't have VFR day or night currency. It doesn't mention how long it's been since our last IFR flight, so there's a decent chance that this could be 5 months and 28 days since our last IFR flight, whether simulated or actual. So those are some concerns I would come up with for the pilot in this situation. For the aircraft, it says we have 175 total hours in the aircraft. It's IFR certified, but we don't have oxygen or any kind of ice systems. So the first thing that I'm thinking of is I'm currently training in a 172, so 4 passengers or 4 persons plus baggage. We're going to run into weight and range limitations, as I mentioned back at my plan slide. With the number of people and the luggage on board, we can only carry 20 gallons of fuel, which in optimal conditions would be 2 to 2.5 hours worth of fuel, not including reserve. If we include reserve, then we're looking more at an hour and a half worth of fuel. It says we have no oxygen system on board, so that means we have to stay below 12,500 for stretches beyond 30 minutes, which, being a 3.5 hour flight at a flight that I've made before, we're just going to end up staying below 12,500. No anti-ice or de-icing systems means we're susceptible to ice and restricted to not flying in known icing conditions. And then for weight and balance, that's going to be the other thing we really have to consider, and that goes back to the range and limitations for fuel that we can carry and how that's going to affect how we would plan this flight. For environment, it says conditions are VFR for the first 100 miles, then slowly turning IFR by the time you arrive at your destination, utilizing your current METAR, TAF, winds aloft. For the flight planning, the METAR at your destination airport is as follows. So 360 at 8 knots, 2 statute miles visibility, overcast at 800, 0706 for our temperatures, and 2968. This is actually probably fairly accurate for Mesquite this time of year. And it says there's also a airport in VFR conditions about 30 to 35 miles away from the destination airport. So that would most likely be, in the case of Mesquite, it'd be St. George or maybe even northern Las Vegas. I don't know the exact distances to either one of those. So the big things I'm going to see here is there's a concern of ice. We're in an aircraft with no icing systems. We're going to be getting into IFR conditions. This time of year, IFR, Cessna 172 with no icing systems of any kind, that's something I'm going to avoid. I'm not going to be able to shed ice. I'm not going to be able to tell if I'm gaining ice on the top of the wings. We're pretty heavy. We're also not, real fat with gas right now, so we're going to have some limitations there. And then, of course, 800-foot ceilings. 2 statute miles of visibility. We're getting really close to minimums here for an instrument approach into Mesquite, which the aircraft I'm flying 272 Mike. While it does have GPS, it does not have WAS, so that's going to limit some of the options I have for approaches as well. Lastly, we have external pressures. Your boss is looking to possibly hire you to fly with her corporate pilots. It's an opportunity to demonstrate your ability in decision making. It's an important golf tournament, and the corporate plane is in for an annual inspection and not available. About 40 minutes into the flight, the daughter begins to feel airsick, and the conditions include light turbulence. So first of all, flying with a boss that has a potential for promotion. So that's a big external pressure on its own, You could look at the potential for that macho mindset of like, I can do this, even though you really shouldn't. It's an important event. So in the military, we commonly refer to that as get there-itis. So, maybe you have that feeling of like, I got to get there. And it gives you the external pressure to push when you shouldn't. It says that the corporate airplane is in annual inspection and not available. So that tells me that this is not the right airplane for this job. We actually had a different airplane in mind, but it's not available to us at this point. And then the last two parts are an airsick passenger and turbulence. So if we have an airsick passenger, we have a few different options. We can either land, change altitudes, or kind of try and find a different route that takes us through less weather. And then, of course, being light turbulence isn't really a huge problem. However, we may need to slow down to handle that. We also may just end up making the airsick passenger worse, which is going to make the whole thing an even worse situation. So the last thing I would say for my conclusion is, based on what I'm seeing here, this would be a no-go for me. There's too many factors here that make this seem dangerous. There's too much external pressure. There's too much potential for ice in an aircraft that's not made to handle it. We're really close to being too heavy for this flight, and just overall, I don't think this would be a good idea. So my professional opinion would be that we would say no and not go, and find another way to get there. So I hope you found this interesting and informative, and I look forward to your comments below. Thank you.